So colleagues, we come to the final segment, and I'm now assuming the role of moderator, Marc, and I'm going to invite you to make some closing remarks, and then I will indicate a number of thank yous to people who have actually made this possible. So Marc.
So it turns out, by my look at the audience, that those of you who arrived early this morning are almost all still here. And I think, unless I miss my perception, that you will be leaving here with the view that the members of the Commission who you have heard from today are united in a way and to a degree that is remarkable in their view of what the challenge was and what is going to be needed to meet it, and in their support in detail of the recommendations that were made. History as written by historians often makes it look as though the sequence of events that are history were inevitable. But I assure you, there was nothing inevitable about getting to this day, not at all. I remember the countless times when Betsy and I would say to each other, either going into a commission meeting or thinking about the next one after we had just participated in one, well, oh my God, it's still alive. It's still alive. Because, as I think I said in my opening remarks, what we, and I don't mean Betsy and me, I mean all of us who were involved in it, set out to do was to help a group of people who were deeply invested in the system come up with a totally different design. What? The chances of success of that were probably very, very small. And yet, each week, each month as they went by, we survived, went on to the next meeting. And as I said earlier, I think 998% of the responsibility for that success was Britt and Rachel's in their leadership and the commitment of the commissioners to the task. So my point here is that it is not the case that getting here was easy and all the rings of fire are ahead. That's not true. This getting here required getting through many rings of fire. And it is also true, as Checker suggested and Britt affirmed, that there are rings of fire ahead. And I think there is good reason to believe that in the end we will look back and say, how the hell did this happen? Right? But I want to make a point that is very important to me, at any rate. Our interest at NCEE was certainly doing everything we could to help Britt, Rachel, and the Commission succeed. But our larger interest is in the United States as a whole, and the position that we are in as a country, as I said at the beginning of my remarks. Prior to the work of this Commission, somebody like myself, who has a sense of how these other countries have gotten where they are, and feels an enormous sense of urgency about getting states to do what needs to be done. I'm not speaking in theory, I have actually done this, have gone and sat down with governors and said, in effect, here is the case for doing something like this. I've met with some pretty smart governors who cared a lot about their people, whose response often was something like, you know, what you're saying makes tons of sense. It's obviously what we ought to do. And yet, spoken or unspoken, was the message, you must be crazy, Mr. Tucker, because given what I know as a governor of the politics of my state, there is no way in the world this is going to happen. And so why should I invest my political capital in doing this where my capital is limited and there are other areas where I might enjoy more success? The game changer in what you have heard today, in my view, is the following. I can now substitute anybody else for me, but I can now go to a governor with a totally different message. That there is a state that has put together a group of people who actually represent the power structure and the stakeholders in a very faithful way. And they have spent more than 2 years working through these issues and have unanimously signed a set of recommendations to do what we are proposing you do. That is a totally different message than any that I have ever been able to give anyone before. In effect, whatever happens now in Maryland, the document that you are walking out of this meeting with, the interim report, basically sends a message to people who have political power and political capital to spend that if they invest that capital and their power in this agenda, it is possible to get basically the people who hold the keys to the kingdom, the stakeholders and the people in political power, on board. I can't tell you how, from my point of view, that is a great big game changer. It gives the United States a chance to do what it must be done. Thank you all.
Mark, thank you very much. Just some thanks and then a closing comment. It is appropriate to call out, at least by first name, a number of people that have made this possible. So I do want to acknowledge Brendan and Julia, also Joel and Jennifer. This wouldn't have happened without Susie, and I do want to acknowledge Dan and Scott from Widmar, because the communications around this gathering are a very important part of the story to take this forward. David, in a sense, I wanted to come back to your comment that this work will take political will. I think you made it pretty clear that it'll take public resolve, not just public awareness. And all of us today have said it will take all of the stakeholders, not just level of engagement, but co-ownership. Those are the three things that always determine whether public policy really gets traction or not. I think it's a fantastic reminder. I began the day in a welcoming comment by saying that the eyes of the nation, if they're not already, will be on Maryland. I remember time working with multiple jurisdictions. You might remember when the Blair government was first elected, Tony Blair had an entire platform called Education, Education, Education. And it's very interesting to me that likewise in our work with Singapore, with Finland, with Hong Kong, it has been constantly a question of the eyes of the world are on you. That's the way in which we've had global conversations. Well, it would be fantastic if ultimately the eyes of the world are on the US. The question is, can we get the eyes of the nation on Maryland in this next period so that there is a real understanding that this will be a blueprint for the nation? That is a superb promise. So colleagues, finally, can I thank all of those who have joined us online. They have been participating, they've been using the hashtag, and they will be going to the website. Many of them will not go to sleep tonight. They will simply want to spend the entire evening reading every document. And I know that's the case here as well, but could you just give yourselves, thank you, some level of applause for a fantastic convening, and we look forward to further convenings that will advance this remarkable agenda. Thank you very much indeed.